You're live.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready for our 26th student webinar? I know it's exciting. We're sure moving into the new year. This is our first student webinar of the new year. And we have a couple topics to talk about. The first one is going to be, what's new for the students, for you guys for 2019. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit of it, and we'll talk more in depth. Your courses will have an introduction video that we'll be working on, probably up within the next week or so. But the main thing you need to know is that the textbooks have changed. If you are a mid-student where you started out in 2018 and then you've got you're also doing stuff in 2019, you can still use the 2018 content, or you can switch over to the 2019 content. If you're a brand new student for 2019, then what you need to be aware of is that from this point forward, we're dividing the courses up kind of into sections. So you still have the modules or the chapters, but what we want you to do is work on the video lectures first. You're going to do the video lectures, and if there are exam questions that go with the video lectures, you'll do those, all right? And they'll be labeled that they are the exam questions that go with the video lectures. And then it's time to pull out the textbook. You're going to pull out the textbook and go through them, the answer keys for anything that is in the textbook, the content that's in the textbook. You'll be able to see the answer key in your student access area. And you will probably see like 2017, 2018, and 2019 answer keys right there at the top of the screen. Or maybe it'll just be 18 or 19, but we try to keep the current year and the previous year as we have students that are working through in different years. So you will go through the textbooks and work through the little answers and stuff that are in there. And then if there's additional questions that go along with the text, then you'll be able to take those as well. Textbook questions. So you'll have your video questions and your textbook questions. Will you have both? Sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. So it'll all be grouped together. Don't feel like you're going to get lost. And then after you've gone through that textbook, then it's time to get ready for the testing process. So you are going to do the BAT technique on your CPT course or your CPT manual, and put annotations and notes that you may have taken during the video lectures, or notes that you've made for yourself while you were doing the textbook that you want to put in your ICD manual or your PCS manual or even your HCPCS manual. But if you're working towards a credential that uses the CPT manual, this is when you're going to use the BAT technique. Have your chapters ready to go in the CPT manual. You can also do the blitz at any time. Okay, so it's a separate segment that you can start doing that while you're doing the videos with the video lectures. You can do it side by side with the textbook as well. You will need to have that done before you test, though, is go through the blitz. And there's videos that go along with the blitz and the BAT technique, and tells you how to bubble, highlight, and annotate your manuals, the CPT manual. And then with that, while you're doing the blitz, you're going to start doing the practice exams that come along with your course. And during that time, you'll do the practice exam that comes with the course. And then if you want additional help on practice exams, we have paid practice exams that you may want to check to see if you have access to them with your course. Don't go paying for those if they are included in your course, because a lot of them are. So again, don't go out and buy something that we're already giving you because you're a student. But if we have additional practice exams, by all means, you need to do as many practice exams as you can get your hands on before you test. And you want to be getting an 85% on those practice exams before you set for the credential that you want to sit for. Now, in addition, we do tell you that it's a good idea to pick up the study guides that whoever the credentialing company is that you're going to go with. So if you're going to test with a HEMA and they have a study guide for a credential, I would pick that up. Same thing with the AAPC or QPro, maybe Paycom, or even AMBA. These are all credentialing companies that you may be sitting a credential with them, that you're getting your education from us. So it's always a good idea to have that study guide. Most study guides will come with a free practice exam. So again, it's good investments, especially if you get to where you're doing the blitz and the practice exams and you're really struggling. Then jump out to that study guide and make sure that you've got everything covered. Again, you can't take too many practice exams. So that's some of the changes that are happening for the year of 2019. We'll talk about those more in depth as we go along. We plan to have lots and lots of videos, and if you are a CCO student, that means that you have access to the club and you can ask questions there at any time and reach out to your coaches. So again, 2019 is going to be a fun year, and we look forward to some of the changes that CCO is making that I think you're gonna enjoy. So now we want to talk about what's the future of medical coding. I get asked this question a lot. In fact, I was looking just today and saw some comments come through. And so I thought it would be a good idea to kind of go over some true and false statements. Over the most common things that I hear out in social media, or when I go to a local chapter or a conference and I hear people talking, that their fears, kind of the worst thing is the fear of the unknown. What's going to happen in the future? So let's talk about that first. And the first statement is a true statement. Coding has changed in the recent years. Yes, it has. We went from ICD-9 to ICD-10 with a brand new code set, and then we got rid of volume 3 with ICD-9 with the procedure codes, and now we have a whole new code set, ICD-10 PCS. And ICD-10 PCS is used for inpatient procedural codes, very different than anything we've seen in the past. There's a real learning curve there if you are going from how you used to code inpatient procedures to what we are using now. So that's a major change, new code sets. In addition, they are playing with the idea of changing up E&M a little bit. Medicare is talking about that. Supposed to make it easier, but if you've attended the 2018 national and regional conferences for the AAPC, you probably heard not necessarily a lot of negative feedback, but feedback which ended up coming true, that some of the laws that they were going to pass wouldn't pass. But they're on a wavelength that we know some changes are going to happen with E&M. And I don't think they've got it fine-tuned yet, but when they do, we may see some changes with E&M. So in the recent years, that may change. Every year, we get changes in our coding manuals, right? We have new codes, deleted codes, changed codes. So that's not something that is, designated as just recent. That's just a way of life. As a coder, you have to be adaptable. You very seldom do you get in a rut with coding, because there's always something changing and going on. The false statement that you hear with that, though, is coding is going away. No, coding is not going away. But people are saying, all the jobs that were out there, I'm losing my job because they're outsourcing it to India. It is true. Hyderabad, Manila, they are the two major cities in India that are getting outsourced jobs, because they will do the coding much cheaper than we do it in the US. The downside to that is there is no HIPAA control for India. Now, a person can debate whether it's going to last or not, but if somebody can save money by sending something overseas and they don't get caught in a trap or have anything negative happen, then they're going to keep doing it, right? But it'll eventually happen. Something's going to happen, and I suspect that there is going to be a leak or something, and you may see that not be as prevalent as it is now. I do know that there are some remote coding companies that refuse to hire anybody that's not physically in the United States. And so not all jobs are going to India. Are some of the big countries contracting out overseas? Yeah, some of them are. I know that when I worked for Optum, we used to have meetings very early in the morning or very late at night, because we would have meetings with the coders in Hyderabad in India that they had. So again, it does happen, but your job is still secure. You know, I don't see them taking all the coding jobs. And eventually, I suspect that's going to kind of stop. Could be wrong. We'll wait and see what happens. But it just has to have one major HIPAA violation for everybody to come down, and that be not a good thing anymore. So all the jobs are not going overseas. Can they do some things cheaper? Absolutely, they can. But it's all incentives, right? Doctors do the coding now. Well, it's true that the EMRs, now that we definitely have electronic medical records, that if a provider is going to diagnose a child with otitis media bilaterally, there's a code for that, and then they can just type in that and have a drop down and pick the code. It is true they can do that. Do they do all of the coding? Absolutely not. False statement that follows that: doctors do all the coding now and I will not be needed as a medical coder. Absolutely a false statement. First of all, doctors are not trained to do medical coding unless they go out on their own after they become a doctor. They become certified or get additional training. And I'm hats off to the ones that do, because they're the ones that end up keeping more of the revenue cycle, that they get paid better for the work that they do because they understand the coding and the billing aspect of it. So yes, it is true. The doctors will put in codes and pick codes and populate those fields because they have a computer in front of them and they can just do a little drop down. But that computer and that software is only as smart as the people that are inputting the information. And quite honestly, the EMR companies are struggling to find coders who are also engineers that can create that software. It's in big demand. Great engineer software developers, but they're not coders and they have no medical background. Or even if you get a doctor who is also, has the experience and can help with setting up the software, they're not a coder. So again, there's a knowledge gap between how to code, and coding can just not be made automated. There is too much gray area in coding. We like to think that it's black and white, but it is not black and white, is it? If you've been coding for very long, you know that there's always scenarios where you have to go out and think, oh, what do we do in this situation? And the guidelines, the providers can go and pick out a code just like you can pick a telephone out of a telephone number out of a telephone book. Look up a word in a dictionary. That's not that hard. But if you have to follow the rules and the guidelines that are set forth, they don't know those, right? And therefore they end up not being reimbursed to the capacity that they're entitled to. You're not going to go away. May your role change to be more of an auditor that follows the provider, so he picks codes or she picks codes and puts the data entry in, and so otitis media, he diagnoses otitis media, but when you go and audit the chart, you realize it's bilateral otitis media, which is a different diagnosis than otitis media. You know, he didn't pick right or left, or otitis media unspecified. Well, the insurance company is going to boot that back as an unspecified code, because if you don't know if it's left or right because you're checking the ear, then why should we reimburse you for checking the ear if you can't even write down if it's left or right? And so again, there has to be somebody that is an auditor that follows through and understands the guidelines as well as the disease process to go through there. So the future of coding is bright. However, you may have to adapt and change what you were doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Maybe you've been doing this a long time, like some of us. And, I was talking to someone here about a year ago, and they said, do you remember when you used to have to look up the codes in that great big printout, and you would flip the big pieces of paper and it had the little holes in it, and I said, no, I never had to look up a code like that. And I realized how long they've been doing this, and, I've always had a book, but we adapt and we change, and that will make you a good coder, is to have that type of personality. Moving on, that leads us into the next topic. Who makes a good coder? Well, we usually say, you'll hear people say, I think I'll make a good coder because I'm really good with attention to detail. Right? That's great. That would make a good coder have a good attribute. But not all people that, or if you don't have good attention to detail, maybe that's not one of your skill sets that you're really good at, do you still make a good coder? Yeah, you still could. I am not detail orientated. Absolutely not. I'm just not a detail. My brain does this, and I know some of you that know me may be laughing in the background when, yeah, that's right. Now, I can focus and I can fine tune my brain into what needs to be done, but that is a skill. That's a skill that I have to work hard at. It doesn't come natural to me. And there's other people that it comes very natural to. So again, that is a good thing to have. However, it isn't necessarily going to make you better than another coder. What will make you better is your attitude. Now, I put this one as the very top, and I think that it could be the #1 attribute that makes a good coder. The reason I say that is because, again, like I previously said, everything changes in the world of coding. It's up and down, and you could be doing something one way, and then next week they have you doing something else. I know I worked in one office, and I think in 1 year my desk was moved 4 times. Now, I am not, I get bored very easy, but I'm not necessarily a person that likes change. And so it was something that deep down, it really grated at me to have to change from one place, because I like my stuff where it's at, and I'm not OCD at all, but I like to know that when I go to move something, aside, that what I was looking for is right there, right? And moving and getting comfortable in one room and then having to be moved to another, being moved front, back, and everything, it can be discerning. And there are some people that can't handle that. But if you have an attitude that you're adaptable and you'll embrace it with a positive outlook versus a negative, then you'll be fine. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't irritating. We're saying the way that you react to that is very, very important. Attitude also plays a part in a coder's life, because you are constantly audited. You might as well just plan to be audited from the time you decide to sign up for a course to the time you decide to walk away as a coder, because quality is versus quantity is very, very important with coding. And how do you get better? You have somebody go in and critique and look over your shoulder and make sure that you're doing it correctly. Because we all get kind of in a groove or a rut, and then if a guideline or something changed, then you may not catch it. I've had one friend that was a coder and a biller, and she said that immunizations have been done the same way for the last 10 years, and then they went off and changed some of the coding guidelines and some of the codes, and all of a sudden I was getting all these rejections and denials, and I couldn't figure out why, because she had forgotten that with the code changes, things had happened, and she'd been doing it for years, and it still caught up with her. So again, she has a really positive attitude and says, okay, I can clean this up. I know what has been done. Or a Debbie Downer is not going to do well as a coder. A lot of times you're working with other people in maybe one room in cubicles or something, and if you're a downer, then you bring everybody else down. If you're a positive person, I'm not telling you, you don't have to be a person that bounces off the walls, but if you always have a positive outlook on what you're doing, and if somebody comes in and tells you, hey, you need to correct this, or we're going to do this way, then you embrace it and you move forward. And that makes everybody in the office more comfortable. I think I've talked many times about getting a job as a coder, and your skill may not be what they're looking for, but your attitude comes across as a person who's not a Debbie Downer and would get along with Ethel over in the corner that's been coding for 30 years, and she's stuck in her ways and she's a little bristly, but she does a good job, and they're not getting rid of Ethel. So they want somebody that will be able to work with Ethel and yet not be intimidated or feel bad about putting up with Ethel's ways, and so again, attitude. I would think that would be having a positive attitude is going to get you in the door faster than if you were extremely good with a lot of background experience. That leads me into the next thing that I think is very important, is your knowledge. Now, knowledge is different than skill, in my opinion. Knowledge is taking the proper courses, making sure that you're certified, and so your certification proves your knowledge. You're not going to get a job if you're not certified. And, I think it's a good idea to get more than one certification. Now, when you start out, you don't have to get more than one certification. But if you're in an area where the competition for coders is higher, and that's kind of hard to find, but in some rural places you might find that having more than one credential might be beneficial to you. And so broaden your knowledge base, even if it's something that let's say it's not a credential, but you want to show them that you're always increasing your knowledge, so that you go out and take a compliance course. Even though you say, I'm not going to sit for the compliance credential, but I want that knowledge, and I want them to know that I went ahead and took this training, because every office needs a compliance officer and we don't have one. So I didn't think I really want a billing credential, but I really need some more knowledge about the billing aspect as it goes along with the coding, because I have a feeling that at work they're going to need me to know that, or I know it's going to make me a better coder if I have the billing understanding, and vice versa. If I'm a biller right now and I really can't communicate well with the coders, I'm going to go out and pick up some extra training, maybe not take a whole course, but I'm going to go watch some lectures or attend a conference and really get more knowledgeable about how the coding is done. So your knowledge and bringing your knowledge up is going to make you a really good coder. And also, maybe it's not about a credential or the billing or compliance or something. Maybe it's just understanding the disease process. So every year I try to kind of pick something that I want to increase my knowledge base on. So in 2018, I decided it was going to be interventional radiology. So whenever I saw anything about interventional radiology, I read it. I picked up books. Whenever I went to conferences or was able to listen to talks or lectures, I always picked interventional radiology. And I learned a lot. Now, did I learn enough to sit for a interventional radiology certification? No, I didn't. But I learned enough to make myself more aware of what I didn't know, where to be able to find the information if I come across a case where I need to give input or I need to code something like that. And maybe in the future, I'll decide to go ahead and study more and specialize. But that was the one area that I thought, you know, I've got a deficit here and I want to increase my knowledge base. Interventional radiology has some specific diagnoses and disease processes that go with that. So I increase my knowledge in that as well. So pick something every year to say, hey, you know what? I want to get better at obstetrics, or I want to get better at pediatrics, or oncology, or maybe it's not in necessarily the coding world. Say, you know what, we're in an area where we have a cancer hospital. I'm going to look into tumor registry and get a better understanding. Some of the documents in the books and stuff are free to be able to, or not that expensive, to go ahead and get them and just read about how tumor registry works. It's a little bit about like coding, but it's significantly different. And so again, it increases your knowledge base. It'll make you a better coder because you'll be able to read how they do the diagramming and also how they read out, what am I trying to think of? Like in chemistry, the code that they use, what it means, and you would know what type of a cancer and if it's from a previous cancer, stuff like that. It's really cool. So pick something, always increase your knowledge base if you want to be a better coder. Next is skill. Now I take knowledge and skill as two different things. Skill is being able to get better at attributes that make you a better coder, like the ability to abstract. I was very lucky at a young age. I remember it was in 5th grade. We had a brand new teacher, just graduated and became a teacher. It was her first year. And she decided that we should learn how to speed read. So I learned how to speed read in 5th grade. And I am eternally grateful for her for teaching me how to do that. The downside of that is that that is my inclination whenever I look at anything, is I zip through. It's great in college. It's great when you're studying and learning and stuff. Not so good when it's things that you need to slow down and read word for word, right? And so again, I have a skill that's beneficial in the world that we work in, because it helps you as an abstractor. You know, you learn where to look for things and have them leap off at the page. You train your eyes and your brain to look at things and be red flags for you to get information. That's a skill. Just like a skill is knowing what all different types of EMRs look like, right? So if maybe you use McKesson, maybe you use MedStep, maybe you, gosh, there's like a list of like, I think 17 major EMR companies. And if you've ever done risk adjustment, you've had a chance to probably see all these different EMRs. Some of them have lots of content at the very beginning of each page. I even had some where the doctor's e-signature was at the top, right by the patient's name for the entire document, which made the hairs on the back of my neck go up. I hated that because it's drilled into your brain that everything has to be signed. When you're doing anything legal, you always sign at the bottom. But even the format, is your electronic signature, does it say, you know, electronically signed by Dr. So-and-so? Does it say verified by Dr. So-and-so? You know, so again, there's all different types of verbiage for different EMRs. There is set up for EMRs for review of systems where it'll say negative, negative, negative if they reviewed it, but there was nothing to report. And then there's others that use like bold and not bold. There's some that use a Y or a no, you know, and finding out little things that make you a better coder, like where am I going to find the BMI on this particular EMR? Where do they commonly put past surgery so that I can see if there was an amputation that would risk adjust, things like that. So that's skill. That's not the same as knowledge. That is something that makes you a better coder, increasing your skill set, right? That maybe becoming a faster typist. That's that's increasing your skill set. Using, being able to use Excel effectively. Now you think, well, that's knowledge too. Well, that is, but to me, it's a skill that you're going, especially if you're a remote coder, you probably need to use Excel. A skill set is being able to communicate remotely with your coworkers and your supervisors if you choose to work remote. And because things don't always translate like they do verbally, because you can't have that inflection in your tone. And if you use capitals, then you automatically think that that person is being defensive. And if a person types OMG, I didn't know that, then you're thinking, oh, wait, what's that attitude that I'm getting from that person? Which they may be just trying to inflect, I'm really excited. I didn't know that. Not, oh, OMG, I didn't know that. That doesn't come across. So you have to be able to be skilled in the world of communication. Not only do you need to be skilled in communication electronically, but verbally. You have to be able to talk to people that probably have more education than you or have less education than you. So you don't want to talk down to somebody. You don't want to be intimidated by somebody that, is a doctor and you need to ask them a question, but you're too nervous or too scared to verbalize the question that you need. It'll irritate them. You can't be mousy when you go in and say, Dr. So-and-so did, when you saw Mrs. Jones, they had, 3 different types of hypertension that I could pick from. This is the list. Would you let me know which hypertension this patient had so that I can code it, or be able to give them a proper query. So again, those are skill sets. Maybe even just being able to talk on the phone, that's important. Or your penmanship. All of those are skills. Now, accuracy. Accuracy, again, quality over quantity when it comes to coding, especially in risk adjustment. So accuracy is something that happens the more you do it. So if you focus on your accuracy, then your attitude, knowledge, your skill, all of that plays a part in having accuracy. Somebody told me, oh, I like to do puzzles, so I think I would be really good at as a coder. And I think of this as accuracy too. And honestly, I hate doing puzzles. I like to see I like to be told the end of a book. I like to be told the end of a movie before I go in and see it, because I like to see how it gets to that point. It's not that I don't like surprises, but I don't want to be disappointed, if it doesn't accumulate the way I want. And in coding, that's why I love the disease process. When you're looking at a person's chart and you understand the disease process, you can almost predict what's going to happen. And that makes you more accurate, right? So again, some people, if you like doing puzzles and stuff, it is true. That's a lot of what we do. You're kind of putting these pieces together, but I don't think of them as a puzzle set. My brain works different, but other people's, So with accuracy, what makes you more accurate is time and practice. Speed. Speed, again, comes with all of the other attributes that we just talked about, but speed is not as important as accuracy. However, it is still important. Some people, especially remote work, you get paid by the chart. And if you get paid by the chart and you can only do a few charts in an hour, you're not going to make a good enough income to justify what you're doing, or they're just going to hire somebody else to do the job. You may be great and very, very accurate, but if they have a quota that they've got to meet, they're going to have to hire somebody else to help, or they're going to have to hire 2 people instead of having 1. Speed comes with time. And again, all of increasing your knowledge, your skill set, and your accuracy. But like I said, it comes with the, you're not going to be fast when you first graduate. And most jobs, most people know that it's something that you get better with, because a lot of coding can be very repetitious, especially if you're working with a specialty group. You'll just get faster and faster and faster. And if you're not doing risk adjustment where you're looking at one EMR, then again, things leap up off the page from you and you will get fast. You will get faster fast. Your speed will increase. But just remember, accuracy is more important than speed. But to make the money that you need, you've got to be faster. I always like to tell the story of my mother, who is an artist, and she started painting later in life, but she teaches classes. And if she's teaching oil painting, or if she's just teaching some toll work where that she's showing somebody how to make flowers, you know, her talent, but her skill is better than everybody else in the room because she's done it a lot longer, right? She knows what the paintbrush feels like in her hand. She knows what the paint feels like as it slides across. You don't know, you don't know how much paint to put on that brush, et cetera, et cetera. So again, she's faster and she is better. And so it's, I can't make my flower look, my rose look like your rose, because I've painted thousands of these roses and you've painted 4. Yours is not going to look the same. I've been coding a lot longer than you as a new graduate. Of course, I'm going to see things and I'm going to be faster than you and more accurate than you. However, you'll get there. So again, what makes a good coder? Attitude, knowledge, skill, accuracy, and speed. Those are the things that you need to focus on. So let's move on. What about the jobs? Now, just as we talked about earlier, the jobs are important, and you think, well, all these jobs are being sent overseas. Yeah, some are being sent overseas, some contracts and stuff. But they're not, they have to be really huge contracts, or it's not cost effective for them to send them overseas. But the fact that they're sending them overseas also tells you that there's a need for coders. And some of it isn't just because that it's cheaper to send it over there because they're taking a risk. It's because they can't find anybody to do the work. So let's talk about what we look for in a job. And medical coder, starting out, depending on where you live, on average across the United States. Now, this is an average. You're looking at about $14, or $15 a year, an hour, excuse me. Now, that's relative, because if you're working remote, most of the time, I would say that you're going to start at around $19 or $20 an hour working remote, especially in risk adjustment. If you're working for a facility or an office, yeah, they may start you around $14 or $15 an hour. They may start you less, but if you're credentialed, that's probably a national average. And this came from Indeed. It's a relatively recent survey that you can look at. Indeed is a company that was where you can go out and look for a job. So again, if you are a senior coder, you're probably making $50,000 a year. So you've got a little bit of experience under your belt. National average, or for Houston, I guess, is about $50,000. This has changed because I went and looked at some of the salary surveys that are out there, and in 2015 it was like 46, 48,000, and now it's up to 51. So every few years it goes up. The income definitely goes up. So you can go look at salary surveys from Indeed. So I picked one town, one city, to just kind of get an idea of how many jobs are out there in that one city. Houston is one of the top 3 paying and has jobs available for coders in the nation. I can't remember what the other 2 are now off the top of my head, because I'm sure it's probably changed, but it's something like a California place in New York or something. It's an East Coast and West Coast, and then Houston, which again, think about what's in Houston. And that's why we have MD Anderson. We have several hospitals. We have medical schools. We have, it's a huge area for medicine. Houston is, and it's one of the largest cities in the United States. So therefore, that would make sense. So I just like how many jobs for medical coders in Houston? And that's all I typed, medical coders in Houston. Jobs for medical coders in Houston, I think is what I Googled. And Google itself came up with a list of 97 jobs right now, for within the last month. There were 97 jobs that Google could grab that were listed under medical coder. Now that's not specialties or levels or anything like that, so it's probably a lot more. And then Indeed came up with, within the last 30 days, 46 medical coding jobs in Houston. LinkedIn also had a list and said they had 56 jobs in Houston that they could resource and list from. So again, you can put jobs in your area, but it does make a difference what type of a coding job you're looking for, and we're going to talk about that more in depth. There are jobs out there. The best way to find a job is to network with other coders. So go to local chapter meetings, whether it's going to be your QPro, your AHEMA, AAPC, PAYCOM, AMBA. You need to go to the meetings and network, whether you network with them remotely or you network with them at the chapter meetings that they have. In addition, you can network with people on LinkedIn. That's a great place to network. I don't know, I think I'm up to 15,000 connections on LinkedIn, and I would say 90% of those people are in the medical field, predominantly coding. And I don't know what percentage are what I call headhunters or recruiters, but a huge portion of them are, and they're always sending me job offers because my profile has the information that they're looking for. So if you can also go out to the different websites like Facebook. There's some Facebook groups, and I just joined one today because Don Self sent me a note and told me that I should join, and I think it's called Medical Coding Jobs in America, or it's close to that. So again, that's what they talk about, is coding jobs in America. And I just kind of real briefly looked, and there was like 1,500 posts of jobs. There was, there's like 100 resumes in there for people to look at and things. So definitely you got to network and find the right people. Local chapter meetings is probably the #1 place for your area because they know what's happening. The jobs are out there. So let's talk about the different types of jobs. Let's talk about remote coding first. I absolutely love working remote. There's perks and there's negatives as well, but definitely more perks than there are negatives. So let's be upfront and talk about them. This very top picture would be my dream office. 3 monitors, right? All nice and clean, no clutter. I have 2 monitors, but I got another one coming soon, and a nice comfortable chair, which my chair is comfortable, so I can't complain about that. But one of the things about working remote, you could work with your own computer, but there are times when they send you a computer, a laptop, and then you're using theirs because it's got all the security and stuff set up. But you always want to have an external monitor. Remote work, if you don't have an external monitor, then it's going to be much more difficult. Nowadays, you can actually buy a bifold monitor, 2 monitors in one, and then you can just hook your laptop or your computer into that. Actually, I guess that third one too, or that second picture looks, would be really nice as well, but you notice that there's obviously another desk next to that. So, but that chair looks pretty killer, doesn't it? I think that's supposed to be some kind of a gaming system or something, but in reality, the third picture is what your office probably will look like. That is your home office tends to look like that. And I might add, I wish I could show you some of the things, like I think these are my son's sunglasses. We went out to eat the other day and I found out that Cracker Barrel caters. Oh, here's my peanut butter spoon left over from, So again, as much as I've got my stuff organized, if you work from home, whether you are single, you're married, or if you have children, wherever you're at, that's where your family and everybody will congregate. If you're by yourself, things are going to congregate at your desk because that's where you're at most of the day. So keep that in mind when you go to set up your desk. I always tell people, remote coders, a lot of advantages, but don't go into it thinking that you could do remote coding from the dining room table. That's not going to happen. You need a designated area. And I have worked in my bedroom, and that's not always a good idea either. It works if you have to do it, set up a little corner office, but it's very hard to work in your corner office when your husband's snoring behind you, right? Or you have to shut the door and he can't come in. They don't like that either. So plan that out if you choose to work remote. And we've done videos on that. You can jump out and look at that. The thing about remote coding too, probably the number one thing, is the availability. There's actually a lot of jobs out there for coders doing remote. A lot of the hospitals are sending their coders out. We used to always be in the basement, and now they're sending them home. You can code remote and then come in like once a week or twice a week for meetings and things like that. And it's cost effective for them to do that. And then availability, though, you just have to know where to look for those remote jobs. Do know that risk adjustment tends to be one of the highest areas, specialties of coding that does remote work. Inpatient, not so much. No, it's not as easy to get a job as inpatient as it is to do outpatient pro fee and stuff like that, and as well as in remote. Inpatient's a little harder. So let's talk about your credentials. If you want to go remote, what credentials do you need? Well, you can get a job as a CPC-I as a remote coder. You can. 5 years ago, we would have said no, absolutely not. It's not going to happen. Unless you have a year or two experience under your belt. Nobody's going to take a chance on you. But now that the laws have changed with EMRs and that people are sending people home, they're willing sometimes to take a chance on you, but it's very difficult to ask questions and have somebody at your fingertips, literally, right next to you when you have questions. And so they don't want to take a chance on you, because what experience do you have working remote? If you don't. Now, I did talk to a person that's going to be one of our interns, and she was I believe, I may not get the numbers right, she was an ICU nurse for 17 years, and then she became a risk adjustment, and then she got the CPC after that, which is a little different. A lot of people don't do it that way. But she had been working remote for HEDIS and doing some stuff for a long time. So remote for her is not a problem. She has experience remote. But if you go in and you're a CPCA and you've never coded before and you've never worked remote before, that's going to be really kind of a tough sell for them. But there are jobs out there. They will take a chance, and definitely in risk adjustment. There's companies that need coders. They will do the training for you. And if you cut it, then great, you're in. But it's kind of a good area to cut your teeth on. So it can happen, just not as prevalent. But don't feel bad if that's your career goal. Credential that you want, though, might be definitely a CPC or a CCS, a HEMA or something. But you also might think then, if you want to do remote, getting the CRC, because eventually it will happen where they want you to have a risk adjustment credential. And right now, that's probably the most recognized risk adjustment credential. There's some others out there, but that's probably the most recognized. Salary. People that work remote tend to make a little bit more money than people who work in a doctor's office. Hospitals, even with them. A couple reasons why. One, they don't have to pay overhead. They're willing to pay you more, right? Sometimes you're working per chart. So with risk adjustment, 4 to 5 charts an hour is what they like to see, okay? If you're doing other types of coding, that's not, they're talking about 20. So you get paid less, but you're still making the $15, $20 an hour, maybe $25 an hour. So your salary, your income might be based on your skills and your accuracy and ability to pump out the work. So again, if the better your skill set, the faster coder you would be. If you're hourly, they still will have a quota for you, even if you're hourly. But do know that if you're salaried or if you're working remote, a lot of times you're a contractor. So contractors make more money because they don't have to pay the overhead, and they don't have to pay taxes and all that other stuff. That they don't have to pay someone to do all of that. They just, kind of like cut you a check, more or less. And then they do a 1099. So again, and they can just not give you work if they don't like you. It's like, oh, don't have any work in the queue for you, so they don't have to worry about firing you, things like that. But think about the taxes. If you're a contractor that versus an employee, then you're getting a 1099, and that means that they're not taking out your taxes. So at the end of the year, when you go to do your taxes, you could be in for a rude awakening if you didn't pay attention to your expenses. And also check in with a tax consultant and find out what is for your home office and stuff like that, what you can use as expenses, and the training, the books, et cetera, what's acceptable and what's not as a contractor. So don't let that sneak up on you. Also, remote coders, if you're not an employee, you probably are not going to get insurance. So that's something, if you're a contractor, to pay attention to, if that's something that you need. Space. You got to have the space to be able to work remote. Like I said, you could work in your bedroom, but it's probably not conducive. Maybe starting out, you need a designated area, and especially if you have a family, where you can shut the door and lock it, or you're not going to get work done. Very, very important to have a designated space and have enough room. It doesn't take a lot of room. But you do need at least 2 monitors, meaning 1 monitor for your laptop or your computer and an external monitor. Otherwise, you won't be as fast as you need to do to be working remote. You need to be able to reference and have things up at the same time. Space is very, very important. And then family. Your family has to understand that you're home, but you're working. And I don't just mean the family that's in the house with you. I also mean your outside family. They can't call you up and say, oh, Alicia, I know you're home. Can you run me to the grocery store? Or I have a doctor's appointment, or I need to, can you pick the kids up at school? Can you do this? Can you do that? No. Or can you attend this meeting? Or no, you can't, because you can readjust. Now, do you want to go have lunch with a friend and you want to take a 2-hour lunch? Yeah, you can do that. Do you want to set your hair appointment anytime during the day? Yeah, probably you can do that, because working remote, you can adjust your schedule. I often, when I was coding remote, would work at night after the kids went to sleep, because I didn't mind if my husband was snoring behind me. But I would work right after the kids went to school, and then I had the rest of the day to get working. And then what I couldn't get done, like if I have to go to a school program or I need to take kids to the doctor, so on and so forth, then I could adjust my time, because I had a 24-hour window. Some remote jobs will say, we don't care how you work your 40 hours, but we want you to have a 40-hour work week. So if you work 4 10-hour days, you put in a 40-hour work week, and that worked for some people. Right? If you wanted to work 12-hour days, you could. And with this type of a job, it's understandable. Can you put in 20 hours in 24 hours? No, you can't. Nobody can. But again, let your family know that when you're working, and that sometimes is very hard for them to understand, because they see your car out there. If they call you, you talk to them or you text them, and it's like, what do you mean you can't come over? You're free. I'm working. So that's remote coding. Now let's talk about what differentiates facility coding. And that's actually a picture of MD Anderson in Houston. And the number one thing about working facility work is location. Absolutely location. So if you're in Houston, you're going to be able to probably find a facility job, because there's lots of hospitals, and there's urgent care centers. There's all of these places that are considered, that would be considered facility work, specialty places, specialty hospitals, children's hospitals, cancer hospitals, and cath labs and things like that. But if you live in a little rural town and it takes you 45 minutes to get to the next town that has 2 hospitals, and that's all they've got is 2 hospitals, you're going to have a harder time finding an inpatient job, because quite honestly, coders don't leave their jobs when they get a job. Why would I have to leave? I sit down at my job and I just keep working and working and working. I can work till I'm 70 or 80. I'm fine, you know. And unless somebody retires in areas that are more rural or smaller areas, you may not be able to find a position because they're all taken. So consider that if you wanted to get into facility work. Inpatient coding, yes, is facility, but there are remote jobs for inpatient, but not like there is for other stuff. So again, keep that in mind. The other thing is that you have to be willing to be working like in a cubicle. If you're working in a facility, you're not going to get your own office unless maybe you're the supervisor. And even then, you're probably only just walled off a little bit differently so that you can have private meetings and shut a door. But it's usually pretty open wherever the coders are. You may not even have a cubicle. You may just have long tables on the circumference of the room, and you guys are all sitting around there doing your work. So you may not even have a desk per se. And that may, if you're a person that can work like that, work in a room with other people and you're not distracted and you still have your attention to detail and things, that's great. You know, there is some fun things about working. You know, you get to have Christmas parties or you know, birthdays and special days. The hot facilities usually have things going on to promote the company, you know, that are great to have. But a lot of times, if you do work in a facility, you have to keep your desk cleaner and more organized than if you were to work at home, right? And you can't just like hook up a fan on your desk if you get hot. You have to go and ask the maintenance department to come and approve your fan, or you can't plug it in. That happened when I worked at a hospital one time. It's like I just was having these hot flashes. I was like, I can't plug in my fan. Nope, maintenance has to come and improve it. I just bought it. There's nothing wrong with it. Nope, they got to approve it. So they came down, they looked at it, they plugged it in, unplugged it. It's like, okay, you're good to go. It's approved, and they put a sticker or something on it. It's like, so it's things like that that are that you have to deal with when working for in a facility. You usually work a standard shift. So it's not always 9 to 5. It's usually you work earlier than 9 to 5, but hospitals are open 24 hours a day. But coders don't usually do the 2 shifts or the 3 shifts that other jobs in the hospital do. So you're probably not going to be working at midnight. Now, when I worked in medical records, they did have an evening shift that ended at midnight, and I did work that. That wasn't my regular shift. I worked during the day, but there were some times that on the weekends and stuff, they needed somebody to do evening shift, because that's when you had to like carry, if somebody called for a chart, you had to physically go pull it and carry it up to the ER or an ICU or whatever, you know, so someone had to be in the office. And again, you could get a lot of work done because there was nobody else in the office. But usually there's a standard. And if you like that, regular hours, and you can walk away from your job. You know, when you're at home and you work from home, it's not always easy to walk away. I'm at my desk. I could be at my desk, you know, 20 minutes before I get ready for bed. And so that's something to think of. Insurance. If you're going to work for a facility, then you're an employee, and they usually have great benefits, 401 packages, insurance, and things like that. Paid vacation, absolutely you're not going to get that with remote work usually. And even if you work remote, you're probably not going to, and you're an employee, you probably don't, those perks are not high on their radar. But educational expenses, a lot of facilities, they're such a big organization that they can pay for you to get continuing education, or they want to give you training. They're willing to pay for it. Maybe they're willing to pay for half. I worked at a hospital where after you had worked a year there, if you wanted to get a degree in a particular area that affected that where you worked, they would pay your tuition. You had to sign a contract that you'd work for like 3 years with them afterwards, but that, you know, that's huge. That's definitely a perk for you. Sometimes they'll pay for conferences, and so that's nice. They may not send you every year, but they will budget that in for you to go to conferences to bring up your education. The other thing is that you're right there with your coworkers. You know, that's fun. I'm a very verbal person. I like to be with people, but they don't necessarily like, not all of them liked working with me because I talk, and that can be very distracting to some people. I did learn to be quiet, though. It is something you have to learn to do, but you do have coworkers, and that can be fun. Whereas if you work other jobs, you may not have the same number of coworkers that do exactly what you do. Your clothing, you definitely have to dress differently. You know, I joke that most of my work day, nobody has to see me below here. You know, if you work remote, you can stay in your jammies all day. You know, you can wear house shoes, but if you work at a facility, you've got to wear a professional wardrobe. You've got to have your ID badges. You know, you've got to look professional. Another thing to think about, if you're working in a facility, you can't wear heavy perfume. Some people don't think about that because you're around sick people, or you're working in a enclosed area. That can be very annoying. So again, you know, that means you got to, usually if you're a person that puts makeup on, you got to put the face on, do your hair, you know, and look professional. So clothing is an expense, and but it's a fun thing too, to be able to do that. And then there's a commute, usually, right? So you're going to have rush hour traffic. And if you work for a facility, usually you're going in and you're leaving during rush hour traffic. If you live in a city or wherever there is a hospital, the traffic's going to probably be a little more, even in remote areas or rural areas. So it is something that you have to think about commuting. I only have to walk across my house to commute, but a commute usually is a little bit farther for a facility versus a doctor's office. So those are the things to consider for facility work. Now let's talk about pro fee, which when I say pro fee, I'm saying outpatient coding. So this will be a doctor's office that you'd be a provider. One of the perks is that you may be working for one provider, one doctor, or you could be working with several doctors. But a perk in coding for a doctor's office is that you have clinicians and doctors at your fingertips. If you got a sore throat, you just let the doctor know, or you let the nurse know. If you need your flu shot, they'll work you in. You know, it's like, oh, here, let me just give it to you real quick. You know, you have them to ask questions. There's little benefits and perks about that. So again, you could be working for one doctor, or you could be working for multiple doctors in an office. But in an office, even versus a facility, you may still know all the doctors, but by name, but you may not know them personally. Whereas if you work for pro fee outpatient, you probably know everybody by name. You know their birthdays, and you know their personalities. You get to know, you know, who is not, which provider's not a morning person, which provider stays too long in the room with people, who's a talker. You know, which provider will do whatever you need them to do if you give them chocolate. You know, things like that. So and so has to have coffee all day long. Don't give so-and-so coffee or they'd be bouncing off the wall. You know, you learn those things, and that's kind of comforting. It's very familiar to work in a doctor's office. Also, there is, with working in pro fee and a provider, there's specialties. So again, maybe you're into pediatrics, and so you'll be able to do just pediatrics, that coding. Maybe you're into cardiology. You can work for a cardio or sports medicine, you know, orthopedists. Maybe you want an infusion center, or a, let's see, renal, you know, and then you work part of dialysis and things. So that's kind of fun. Whereas facility work, you will be getting everything, right? You're going to get ICU charts. You're going to get heart transplants. You're going to have different procedures and stuff like that. So that is kind of interesting and fun to have the different specialties that you get to deal with. If you work in a doctor's office, you're probably going to have more than one hat. You know, so you may be the coder, but you're probably the biller too, you know. Or if there is a biller and a coder, you guys work together. But if they get busy and they need help at the front desk, guess who they're going to have go up and work on the front desk? If they need somebody to make some copies, guess who they're going to ask to make those copies? If they have a special job or project that comes up, that you may be getting, you get asked to help them out, and which is all a good thing. So again, that's a personality that you need to, an attribute in your personality that you need to have, that you need to be adaptable, right? Not saying that you'll be cleaning the toilets, but you could be cleaning the toilets too, you know. There's more than one hat usually in smaller offices for people to go around. You still get to take vacations. You can take vacation time. You know, you're an employee, so you're going to have insurance and those perks. You may not have big 401ks. Now, if you work for, say, a pediatrician, the downside is that you're going to be exposed to cold, sick parent, you know, sick children, parents who are frustrated, irritated because their child's sick, and things like that. And you're always going to be busy. Whereas if you work for a specialty like a plastic surgeon or a specific cardiology specialist or something like that, their offices will be completely different than a pediatrician's, right? A plastic surgeon's office is very fancy and everything, you know, and their employees tend to make a lot more money too. You have to dress a certain way and everything because you got your marketing for your clients and things. So keep that in mind. Taxes, you don't have to worry about, you're an employee. Your clothing definitely may change. If you're working for a pediatrician, you may wear plain, you know, regular street clothes, or they may say, hey, everybody in the office, we want to wear scrubs because we want the people that come in to know that you're an employee and not just somebody walking through the office, even if you have a name badge. You know, so you may be back in the back in your little office, and you usually have an office too, by the way, a place that's quiet for you to do your work. But you know, they may say, hey, you can wear scrubs, which is great because it saves you a lot of money. If you maybe everybody wears a certain type of scrubs, maybe everybody wears blue scrubs at this particular doctor's office, and they have you wear blue scrubs too. So you know, that's nice. But Profi, you tend to have usually your own office if that's what you're doing as the coder. But again, you may be doing more than one thing. I really liked this cartoon. It's from cartoonstock.com. So there's the attribution and permission to be able to use this as the assistant to the physician's assistant will see you now. So depending on how busy the office is, you could have some real unique hats out there to jobs. So now let's wrap this up with, you know, what does your future hold? And by all means, it is true. When you work hard, you're going to achieve your goals. You're going to make it. And the first thing I think new coders and the students think about is, hey, if I take the CPC exam, not the CCS or some of those others, the CPC has the A on it, and that means apprentice. And everybody thinks of that as the scarlet A, the scarlet letter, but it's really not that big of a deal. Some people say that they have trouble getting a job with the A on their credential, but I think it really you can work with that. Play up your strengths, what your background is, and there's ways that you can tweak that. Maybe get a hold of a coach for jobs, job career counseling and everything, and let them help you tweak your resume and your verbiage on how you do interviews so that you can put your best foot forward. Facility work, you don't usually get a job with an A unless you have something else to back it up. But doctor's offices and remote work, sometimes not, but definitely with risk adjustment, they don't care. So don't go in thinking of it as the scarlet letter. Instead, let them know that this is my new career and I'm excited and this is what I have to offer you, you know, because I'm fresh out of the box and willing to learn, you know. So there's things that you can do. Definitely consider getting multiple certifications. And I don't mean just from one organization. Say you're a CCS with a HEMA, then think about picking up the CPC with the AAPC, because that allows you an even larger networking population to associate with. QPro is got some really good credentials. Maybe you want to do Paycom and they have practice management, or one of the best billing credentials out there is AMBA. So say you're a CCS and you say, hey, I want to get a billing credential too. Jump out there and talk to AMBA. So you can, that's down there lower, memberships to multi-organizations. Some of the negatives is that you have to pay in dues to all of them, but possibly your employer will help with that. So again, you want lots of networking. You will be networking from here on out, and there's little ways to network. I would consider getting business cards. Your employer probably will provide those for you, and tell them you need them for networking, especially before you go to conferences and things. But even if they don't, go to Vistaprint and you can custom make some business cards and get like 500 for 15 bucks or less. You know, they run sales all the time because you're going to want to have a card that you can give to people for job opportunities as well as that networking. Say you want to get into pediatrics, you go to conferences and you find some other coders that are works for a pediatric office. You want to connect with them so that you can ask questions and stuff later after the conference. And going to conferences, you want to try to get to something at least once a year or once every 2 years. You can go to national conferences or you can go to regional conferences, local chapters in all of the organizations. They have conferences and they have smaller kind of like May Mania. AAPC has May Mania every year, which is kind of a conference. So again, pay attention to that. You do have to pay dues to whichever organization you get your credential with. It doesn't matter who you are credentialed with. Expect that. That will be a way of life from here on out as long as you hold your credential. It is just as important as having your driver's license. Every time you go in and you get a new driver's license, I think you have to pay like 20 bucks. Maybe you don't. I can't remember. But you know, there's fees associated with dues and fees with some organizations. Sometimes the local chapters that you attend, you have to pay a fee when you attend that one. And that usually is just to cover the overhead of whatever area you have to rent to be able to have your meetings and things. So it might be $5, it might be $10. And I'd only been to one, I think, been a member of one where you had to pay. And then again, I already mentioned membership, multi-organizational, that, you know, if you're able to do that, I would consider it. Keep in mind there's an expense, but you know, maybe whoever you're working for, even if you're working remote, you know, it looks good to have multi-credentials, organizational credentials behind you. And just like the dues, you will be required to have CEUs. CEUs don't always cross either. So if you're with a HEMA, you may not be able to use AAPC credentials, and AAPC may not take a HEMA credentials. It just depends. So always look into that to make sure. Paycom took our CEUs with CCO, and I think AMBA did too when we would do lectures about billing. But you will have a required amount of CEUs that you need to get usually every 2 years, usually not every year. And if you have a specialty credential, there may be specialty CEUs associated to that credential. A lot of times your employers will help you with your CEUs. And there's a lot of places to get free CEUs like CCO. We have a lot of CEUs that are free. We like to help out with that because we like to do training. So again, this is your future. As you are a student now, this is what you have to look forward to. We're going to wrap it up now. If you are watching this and you are not a student, or maybe this is one of the first times you've been connected with CCO and you want to learn more, go to cco.us. But if you want to know more about our club, where we answer questions from people who are all walks of life, whether you're just thinking about becoming a coder, maybe you're a coding student someplace and you need some assistance and maybe some career guidance, or you're struggling in a particular area and you're needing to get some more education in that area, or maybe you're already out there working and you need to ask a question. Say, I ran up into this scenario and I need to know how to address my provider about that, or the billers and the coders are debating on this is what we should do. You know, we answer questions like that. We have instructors, we have coaches, we have students, we have SMEs, subject matter experts. We have people that have done specialty work, all in there looking at the club and answering questions as we go, as they appear. And that's how we also know the questions that you have so that we can address them in these webinars. So go to cco.us/club and look how easy it is to join the club and have your questions answered. If you're a student of ours, you're already in the club. So that's a great thing to be a part of. Lots of perks of the club, but you can go out to the website and see that. So if you watch us on YouTube or Facebook, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the little bell so that you'll know when we put another video up. If you're on YouTube, I think they do that on Facebook too. Every time we go Facebook Live, I think you can set the notification. It's a bell on YouTube. I think it may be a bell on Facebook. I'm not sure. Not in Facebook as much as I used to be. So you can ask questions there, but by all means, the CCO Club, that's the ones we take care of first. We're right on it with them. That's it, guys. Thanks for joining us. Look forward to you graduating your course and getting certified. Bye, guys.